can start. We have now over 50. I think I'll get over, but okay. So it's 10 a.m. So I would like to, first of all, thanks to distinguished Professor Thomas Cooke, who's a good friend of us, and he's always been very helpful, very collaborative with Peeptrade. We're very humbled to have him here. We really appreciate your contribution, especially in these times of uncertainty. You know, like it's great to have someone with your experience here to tell a little bit what's going on the markets, what are your views, and maybe answer some questions to the participants here. So thank you very much for being here, Tom. It's always a pleasure to see you. Mm-hmm. How do you want to start? Do you want to go ahead and give a brief?
Yes, I'm ready to go. Thanks.
Awesome. Thank you very much.
First, I want to just welcome everyone and thank you for taking the time out of your busy day to join in this conversation. A little bit of background. I am a professor at Georgetown University in the McDonough School of Business, and I've been at Georgetown since 1975. And what brought me to Washington, D.C. was pursuing a law degree, which I did at the Georgetown University Law School. And then I went back to school to get a master's in law. And I went back a third time to get a master's in tax law. So my principal area of concentration at the university is the legal environment of business and also federal income taxation. That being said, I'm working with graduate students today on consulting projects in South Africa. When the virus first hit us in a very big way, our students were away on spring break. So that would have been March. And while they were away on their break, they were told that upon return to campus, all classes would now be online and not live, and that they must leave their dormitories within 2 weeks. No sooner did they get back from spring break, and they were told they only had 1 week to leave the campus. The environment is such that we have faculty that are new to the whole online platform, students that have never had an online class before. So there's been a lot of training and retraining, retooling that's been going on. I want to say that a product known as Zoom, ZM, has worked incredibly well for us. While we have been notified that there may be some security issues at play, I believe Zoom has a handle on what those issues are. And I personally have not seen any evidence of this so-called Zoom bombing. That being said, we were advised by our technical people that perhaps we should have passwords for entering Zoom. And then they also recommended, which I have not done, is that once a class begins, maybe you lock the room. You prevent other people from coming in the room. My issue with that is that we have students from all over the world, some of who are even in quarantine, and I think that would pose an unfair burden on them. So I have not requested a password. I've not requested anybody be locked out, and so far things have gone very, very well. What Georgetown University has done, because of the high level of anxiety and stress among students, faculty, administrators, we are giving our students this semester a pass-fail option. So if you would prefer to take a class pass-fail and not for letter grade, you may make that election. And we will give you up till the last day of classes, but we will not give you through the final exam. So you have to make that decision before the final exam. I can tell you that the Georgetown Law School has announced all grades are pass-fail. You don't even get to make that election. So I think in the United States, there's been great disparity as to how the students are being treated, how the grades are being treated. And I think most of us are praying for a smooth end of the semester. We are online with all activities through the summer. We've made no decision regarding the fall. Now, to tell you a little bit more about the atmosphere in Washington, D.C., our courts are closed, the buildings are closed, cases are being postponed, and you may have read that in many of our states, prisoners are being let out of jail early because of concerns with the virus. That includes state prisons as well as federal prisons. And finally, for the first time in American history, the United States Supreme Court has announced that beginning early May, for a period of 2 weeks, they will be taking arguments in cases by telephone and not in the courtroom itself. And this will be the first time the court has ever heard argument cases virtual. And I thought it was very interesting that rather than using Zoom, again, it may be the security concerns, they elected to go old school, which is telephone. Now, let me tell you how I like to begin my day. And I think many of you do the same thing. I begin every morning by getting up early enough that I get a good sense as to what has happened in the Asian markets. And then, of course, we wait for the opening of the European markets. And then, of course, I look at the pre-market in the United States. I look at any breaking news, if you will, overnight. Now, the breaking news over the weekend was that the United States Congress appears to be reaching a deal to provide more revenue, $250 billion revenue, to smaller businesses that were not able to get on board with the earlier federal subsidies. I would have thought that that encouraging sign would be enough to drive the markets up, but the overnight picture, the pre-market picture, was very negative, and it's continued to be negative this morning. JP Morgan had an announcement this morning that it certainly does see April and May as being bleak in the financial markets, but it sees some light come June. Now, the United States as a country is struggling today on when can we get back to business. There's a casino in Las Vegas this morning arguing that Vegas should be ready to get back to business. One can only imagine how much revenue has been lost in Las Vegas. The problem with the Las Vegas model is that most of the positions, be it the restaurants, the hotels, the casinos, typically involve large crowds. And in my opinion, in order to get back up and running, you would have to structure the operation in such a way that people would not be on top of each other. And that's polar opposite to the way casinos operate. The numbers coming out of Las Vegas in terms of virus contamination have been lower than in other jurisdictions, but I'm honestly not sure that this is the time and the place to be rushing back to the workplace. New York City, the epicenter of the virus in America, the numbers are getting better, but there's no way things are going back to normal anytime soon. I can tell you that we have students that have summer internships in New York City, and they have been told 100% online, or at least online until the beginning of August, and then we'll see. My advice to students with New York City opportunities has been, don't sign any leases and don't expect anything to change during the summer. Some of the internship companies are being rather generous in paying the students for 10 weeks and making them work only 5. Some are going with payment for 10, you work 7, but many are saying we're cutting from 10 weeks to 5 weeks and cutting compensation in half. So New York City is coming back, but it will not be very soon. Some good news coming out of Michigan. Some bad news coming out of Massachusetts. Boston, the epicenter of problems there. Philadelphia is now under the microscope. Now the so-called experts say Washington, D.C., that we have yet to hit our peak. Our neighboring state, Maryland, thinks it's 50% of the way there. So when JP Morgan paints a bleak picture of April, May, and a rosier picture in June, I wonder if June isn't really July, if July really isn't August. We, as you know, are experiencing the worst Q2 that we've seen. And we are getting, this is an earnings reporting season, and I'm looking at a headline right now. United Airlines posts a $2.1 billion loss, seeks more federal assistance. So here's an example of a company in an industry that just received financial assistance, recognizing that what they got to get them allegedly through September 30 may not be enough. United Airlines has told us that they have canceled 90% of all domestic flights in the US for the month of May. I read this morning that they're trying to unload some of the aircraft to keep down their revenue losses. So we are seeing a bleak picture in terms of revenue being announced now. What's most important for all of us to be listening to is, number one, the bleak revenue, which we all anticipate. But what is the forecasting? What does the forecasting look like? And I don't think the airlines can say to us today with any degree of certainty that there's a rosy picture ahead for their forecasting. We are clearly in what we're going to call uncertain waters. Now, the medical experts will tell you that we'll never be 100% back in play until we ultimately reach appropriate medication that prevents us from getting the virus. And we probably are conservatively 12 to 18 months away from having that done. But in the meantime, the big issue is testing. Can we have a system in play where there's confidence and adequate testing? America has fallen flat on its face in preparation for testing. We need to admit that. We are far behind the curve when it comes to testing. And until that's in place, are you going to feel comfortable going to restaurants? Are you going to feel comfortable flying? Are you going to feel comfortable going to movie theaters? So as you're thinking of your investments, I think the airlines present a very unique challenge that may last 6 to 9 months. What that means for 2021, total speculation at this point. I personally believe that once things start settling down, what you're going to find is a great deal of reluctance on the part of consumers and businesses to encourage flying. I think the airline industry will be one of the slowest to recover. One side effect of what we're going through is the product of Zoom and other models like that that allow us to conduct today's session and other sessions without having to travel, without having to pay any hotel rooms. I think businesses are going to become more cognizant of that fact and less encouraging when it comes to flying. And as far as the general population getting back up in the air, staying at resorts, I think we're going to be very slow to recover. I would not be jumping today on a company like Disney because I think their theme parks depend on large crowds. And I just don't see people getting back into that spirit anytime soon. Now, that being said, you may have seen video evidence this weekend that a city in Florida by the name of Jacksonville opened up its beaches. And the sad thing was, in watching the people on the beaches, there was no social distancing. People were on top of one another, walking along the sand and in the water. And the real concern is that if we rush to get back and we suffer a setback and it sets us way, way back, then how long will this recovery period be? Someone suggested this morning that maybe it's time for the Federal Reserve to start investing in equities. I don't know. That's certainly something they do not do. And I don't know that that's something that's going to be high on their consideration. So we're looking for testing. Do I have the virus? Testing. Have I had the virus? Testing. If I had it, am I getting it again? And ultimately, the ultimate vaccine that prevents me, hopefully, from getting the virus, such as we have for the flu. Those will come in stages, some sooner than early, some sooner than later. And hats off to the pharmaceutical companies that are early in getting us the preventive devices. They will reap, I think, a very warm reward when that happens. I'd like you to consider that in this environment in which we are focusing, there is a gentleman that appears on the CNBC platform on a fairly regular basis. I have a lot of respect for his analysis and his overview. It's Mohammed El Arian, E-R-I-A-N, and he is with a company called Allianz. Now, Mohammed was on the network early this morning, and he said that, there's a consensus forecast of the U.S. economy being in a decline of 7.7% for 2020, and he sees that forecast as being really under the right number. He sees potential -10 to -14 growth in 2020. That is obviously very alarming, very alarming. And again, that conclusion depends on how a lot of things fall into play. I see the banks as struggling. We know they had a high a week or so ago, but now seem to be down again. Lots of concern over defaults, lots of concern over potential mortgage defaults, lease defaults, some landlords making necessary concessions. Some small businesses will probably never reopen. There's a company called Federal Real Estate Trust, and I was reading this morning that what they did over a period of many years was to take the typical mall model of store, and change it to be more lively, more restaurants, more bars, more entertainment oriented. And that model may be very, very slow to get back. While you and I might not have an issue walking into a clothing store, again, subject to maintaining appropriate distance, maintaining appropriate controls, we may be less reluctant to go inside a restaurant and sit at a table. Now, you want to remove half the tables, spread everybody out, that's one model. But again, what does that do to the revenue? I personally am doing everything I can to support smaller restaurants that are allowing takeout food. I think we've got to save the smaller establishments. I was telling Juan this morning, one of the realities is, we all grow up assuming that's a wealthy company, that's a wealthy business, that's a wealthy bar. And what we're discovering is it takes very little in terms of a shutdown to recognize how perilous some of these businesses are. Not everybody has the so-called cash reserve. Many of these businesses do very well, but they operate 1 month at a time. They cover their expenses 1 month at a time. Now, if any of the congressional legislation, which I'm absolutely in favor of, forces companies taking money to maintain employees on staff, I think that is wonderful. And some companies have taken funds from the federal government subject to keep the employees in place till the end of September. What happens after the end of September, who knows? United Airlines, by the way, is saying this morning, we're looking for more money. Even though we took loans we've applied for loans of up to $4.5 billion, we may need more. And I think there's going to come a time when the United States Congress and the president going to decide, what industries, what sectors are worthy of saving and what are not. I think the airlines will get high priority there. Hotels, I'm not so sure. We may see some consolidation would not surprise me at all to see major consolidation within the hotel sector. Within the airline sector, we've had enough of that, I think, to date. And I don't see any reports suggesting that any activity will take place there. So Mohammed this morning paints, I think, a very objective, bleak outlook. I'd like to think that he's overly bleak, but there's nothing to suggest that that is the case. And that's something we need to, how do we contain the economic damage that's taking place? Now, the president and others would like to see us get back on our feet. Who wouldn't like to see us get back on our feet sooner rather than later? Who wouldn't like us to see restaurants and bars and hotels, everybody enjoying themselves and back to work. But again, I want to argue rushing this process along may not be the right way to do things. Now, for those of you not in the States, you probably have seen reports and videos that we're having some small, and I want to emphasize small, demonstrations taking place in various cities, kind of pushing the envelope. Get us back to work, allow us to get back to work. I've seen signs saying, my health, my choice. Well, your health, your choice is fine, but your health, your choice impacts on me. And if you're going to take the risk with your own life, with your family's life, don't come in contact with me. So I'm at risk because you place me at risk. Social distancing clearly works. We have good news coming out of Germany. We had very good news coming out of Singapore, but then it seemed to step back. And it may have stepped back because of people entering the country after we thought everything was fine. Numbers, reports out of China have been better. So some countries approach this differently early and are seeing more positive results. But clearly, keeping safe distance is very important. Tyson's Food, big player in the food industry in America, reported 90 employees with the virus at a major plant outside of Nashville, Tennessee. We had a pork producing factory in America shut down completely because of an outbreak of cases, I think 300 plus at their factory. Juan, do we have any questions initially that you'd like me to look at?
There haven't been any questions, so now I'll ask.
Well, I want to ask you a question if I can.
Sure.
So I do when I have my classes with my students who are all over the world, I like to ask, how are things where you are? And I will tell you that one immediate impact we're seeing at the university is that we believe there will be visa issues with students from China taking classes online after this semester. And that will be a very serious impact on many universities in America that are very dependent on Chinese students coming here to study. When my students went back to China, they told me they were put into a government-sanctioned hotel for 14 days, and they're after allowed to go back home. My students who went back to South Korea, which, by the way, along with Germany, may stand out as a model of how to handle this crisis, but they were put in 14-day at-home quarantine, at home. And I asked the young lady on Friday, well, what would happen if you walked outside the house? She goes, first of all, they call throughout the day. They are monitoring me with the GPS on my phone. If I do step outside and they find me outside, $10,000 fine. It's a repeat violation, even more than that. So again, I don't know if any city, any country has the perfect model, but I do think when the dust settles, we will look at what Germany did. We will look at what South Korea did. We will look at what Singapore did, and perhaps even what China did to bring its numbers down. But again, it's incredibly important that there be transparent reporting and that medical experts be allowed to go into other countries and study exactly what they did before issuing any reports. So rather than rely on what anybody has to say, let's look at this objectively. Question we have, do you think President Trump will extend the quarantine? I think President Trump is doing everything he can to get business back to normal. He discovered last week that the United States Constitution does not give him the right as a president to unilaterally tell every state what to do. So we have 50 states, we have territories, we have the District of Columbia. Each of them has a government that will make the decision as to how we get back and when we get back. And by the way, when we get back, when we set a plan in play, let's keep in mind that unlike 200 years ago, we travel across borders. We travel across borders. So I'm out on the highway yesterday and I see a sign. If you're traveling to, and I'm in Washington, D.C., if you're traveling to New York or New Jersey, 14-day quarantine required. And again, that would be voluntary quarantine in your home. New Jersey has been second in terms of having issues with the virus. And again, Massachusetts, unfortunately, not looking great today, and Philadelphia not looking great today. If you look at a map of the US, come on down, suddenly we're in Maryland, which believes it's only 50% through the crisis, and then Washington, D.C. and Virginia. So is this virus, is it actually just kind of traveling down the East Coast? Clearly, the president would tell you there are parts of America where the numbers are very, very low. And so there may be parts of America, the Dakotas, for example, in the heartland, there may be states that can come back to semi-normalcy a lot quicker than others. But there will be laggers. And certainly the governor of New York, I think, went a very long way when he suggested that before we get back to anything that's called normal, we need to consider New Jersey, Connecticut, Rhode Island. So think of this as a regional return to business and not just one state, if you will, at a time. Question we have here regarding the World Health Organization. I understand completely the president's position. I understand there may be evidence that the World Health Organization was not as transparent and as honest as it should have been. What I would question is this the right time to be taking financial sanctions against them? Do we not need them to be exercising better judgment and better opportunities now? So again, I understand the president's position, but I'm not sure this was the right time. Cruise industry, that's a great question. I think the cruise industry will be, again, very slow to recover. I think the first ones back to take a cruise will be people who have taken them before and have faith and confidence in that particular cruise line. But again, I think that will be very, very slow to recover. By the way, cruise lines had issues long before we hit the peak in March. We know there were outbreaks on cruise ships. We know people weren't able to get off the ships. There were certain countries, certain cities that wouldn't recognize the cruise ship's right to be embarked. So I would be very reluctant personally to be jumping on the cruise lines now.
There's a couple of good questions at the beginning. Is deglobalization a reality in the post-COVID environment?
Read that. Tell me, where's that question in the chat section?
It's from Rebecca Cooke.
Okay, let me see.
From the first two questions, I think.
Is deglobalization a reality in the post? Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, we are a global society, and we need to recognize that in this day and age, it is inevitable that people are traveling everywhere and anywhere for good social business reasons. And if we don't, and by the way, where is the United Nations? I see nothing in the news regarding the United Nations. What role is the United Nations playing in this? But at the end of the day, you and I are going to have to have a level of comfort that things are working well around the world, just not in our respective countries. So I think there'll be a real change in attitudes there. We have a program at Georgetown, a graduate program. By the way, up until now, the only program we had online, 100% online. It's a Master's of Science in Finance. And I, along with those students, 100 of them, were scheduled to travel to South Africa 2 weeks. And while over there, we would be working with client companies, some very well-known global and some very well-known local companies. Well, of course, that journey has been canceled. So we've been working with companies in South Africa and neighboring countries online now for over a month. And the reports that we've been getting is everything shut down, stay at home. The president of South Africa extended that to cover the Easter holiday because there was a fear that people would be traveling to go back and visit relatives and friends. And now that has been extended until early May. And again, part of that is in South Africa, there's 2 major holidays in the first week in May, and they wanted to again avoid travel. But the concerns coming out of South Africa are some increase in criminal behavior, many people living paycheck to paycheck. And we work for a charity in South Africa. The name of the charity is Hope Worldwide. They do so much good work in getting out and helping the children early on with education and with being fed. And that is now in danger. That is now in danger. How do we get adequate food to children that are dependent on food subsidies? How do we continue to educate our children? And one thing we've learned in America the hard way is that if one of our secondary schools or elementary schools is closed and we want to teach the children online, not everybody has a computer. Not everybody has internet service. Not everybody has good Wi-Fi. I'm discovering that on the college level. We can't assume that with a click of the button, everybody's able to be in the same room, learning the same stuff. So we've set back our educational program, which is incredibly important to this country and other countries. We've set this back for months after months after months. So that's a major concern. So President Trump himself cannot extend the quarantine on a national level. He has to leave it up to the respective states. I do think you'll find some states coming online sooner rather than later. I guess the good news over the weekend was I saw the price of gasoline falling. I mean, I'm not sure that in the overall scheme of things, that's so good, because the bottom line is we're not driving. So yes, I can get petrol at a lower price, but we're not on the highways. Oil did drop this morning. And again, anybody's guess as to what the floor is there. We have a political question there, which I don't have an answer to. This is the first time in American history that we're going to go through a presidential campaign with nothing live, no rallies, everybody being online. And I think that's going to affect fundraising. It's going to affect people's attention to it. I'm not sure people want to be watching political ads left and right. We have 2 political conventions scheduled for the summer. Now they've been pushed back a bit, but I find it hard to believe that we're going to have any arena with 20, 30,000 people inside for a political convention. So conceivably, both those events get canceled. And again, think about the trickle-down effect. Assuming there were planes, people won't be flying to those cities. Assuming people are there, hotel rooms will be unoccupied. I live in an environment in which 2 major hotels, a Holiday Inn and a Marriott, have just closed their doors for the time being. So this is just not economically so good. Any other questions, Juan, stand out? Yeah, you want to look at the cruises 18 months from now. I think conceivably that's a more positive picture than it is now. So I think cruise is absolutely on hold until early 21. And I think even in January 21, that's anybody's guess. I'm targeted for brochures. And I do see the cruises advertising better prices come January. But again, I'd be reluctant to book a cruise unless it came with a 100% guaranteed refund by a certain date and time. Not 10%, 20%, 30%. You give me all my money back. If come December, I'm not going to travel. I'd be more comfortable then in making a reservation. And by the way, as you know from the cruise lines, it's very typical when people book a cruise, they book the airfare with it, but where are the airlines going to be in September, October, November? That's anybody's guess at this point.
There's a couple of good questions, I would say, which are, I suppose, like kind of related. What sector do you think historically has been better? And if you think that this COVID crisis has been already priced by the market?
Okay, I think I made up a list of companies that I've been looking at very, very carefully to see how they handle. First of all, I want to say hats off to any companies that have taken time to produce advertisements subtly that ask us to stay healthy, stay at home, and when you come back, we'll be back. I think that's very encouraging. I'm especially pleased with grocery stores that overnight installed better protection for employees and customers, such as the plastic screen that we're seeing at the cash register, and something new in America, directional signals as we go up and down aisles. So the traffic is flowing, if you will, in one direction. That's something new. I've seen people lined up outside grocery stores, keeping a safe distance. So the store is controlling the number of people inside. Somebody leaves, somebody gets to go in. I think that's a very good model. I'm impressed with how Chipotle has done, CMG. Who cannot be impressed with the news coming out of Tesla? Totally unrelated to the virus, but again, strong production numbers and a fairly solid forward path. Who doesn't love Amazon? Are we too late? Are we too late to get on the Amazon train? Assuming for a moment that this so-called shutdown goes through the summer, and if it does, that will be devastating to many, many industries. How would Amazon not continue to be a winner? Assuming we're not in the mood to travel, assuming our colleges, our high schools, our elementary schools are all online in many, many places until December, how does it not benefit a company like Zoom? Shopping on eBay. Netflix. Look at the numbers coming out of Netflix. Again, you think about it. What are people most likely to gravitate to when they're at home? It's going to be watching movies. Now, I was hoping that in the next line of legislation coming out of Washington, there'd be special money set aside for infrastructure work. If ever there was a time to get back road repairs, road improvements, bridge repairs, airport improvements, this is the time. So I'm keeping an eye on Caterpillar, but I don't quite see the momentum coming out of Washington for infrastructure as I thought we would have seen some months ago. One of our stores in America that seems to be doing very well is Costco, buying products in bulk, and again, subject to good controls within the store. Microsoft looks very, very strong. The banks, again, I'm just reluctant to invest in the banks at this time. I don't think there's any risk of banks falling under, but I'm just not sure the environment is so robust. So I'm looking at what the average consumer is going to look to need in the next 6 months moving forward. I think a lot of it will be the basic staples, a Clorox, a Campbell soup. I mean, there are products that we are going to need regardless of what the circumstances are. And in some cases, maybe more of that product now than before. And you've seen this, of course, with products being sold out and not available on the store shelves, for sure. I'm going to guess that when the dust settles, we'll look at Pepsi-Cola and Coca-Cola as doing rather well as people look for soft drinks, beverages at home, as well as their water products, Aquafina and Densing, for example.
Is the COVID crisis, do you think it's already been priced? That's a good one.
Is what?
Is the COVID crisis has already been priced in the market?
I think, it's funny. We seem to live 1 month at a time, 1 month moving forward. So some mornings I wake up and I think it is priced in. And it's certainly, what drove the market significantly up on Friday? It was the hope and the prayer that somebody out there came up with a testing device that would work. I do think if you look at the next 60 to 90 days, we are going to see great progress in terms of the testing, in terms of determining whether I have the virus, have had the virus, etc. I don't think we're going to see any quick, sudden announcement that we have a vaccine. So I think what's going to happen is people are going to get tested. You're going to test that you don't have the virus or you had it. You're going to get some kind of a document that's going to say, here's my status. And that's going to allow you to get back to work in certain sectors. But in order for that to work, that business has to test me. That business has to show customers confidence my employees have been tested. And that means testing people every day. Testing people as they come to work, testing people as they leave. And in an ideal situation, testing customers. So this is a very expensive, but again, we are months behind the curve when it comes to preparing those types of instruments that are needed. Certainly they've got to be provided to the hospitals first before you and I as individuals or businesses. But there's certain parts of the economy that will get back sooner rather than later. I know some restaurants have folded completely. Others have experimented with the takeout. I asked a gentleman the other day at a restaurant, what is the business like? He said it's 50%. 50%. Obviously, his expenses have been cut as he's laid people off, but 50%. And remember, some people have been laid off with pay. Some people have been laid off without pay and have applied for unemployment benefits. And America witnessed an all-time high in unemployment benefits over the last 4 weeks. So we are up to officially 22 plus million people applied for unemployment benefits in the last few weeks. We'll get another number this week, which we hope will be less than it was last week. But again, that's anybody's guess. Last week, I think, came in at 6 point something and was projected to be 7.
There's another one here which says, is secular stagnation possible? Secular stagnation possibility.
Absolutely. I mean, I do think there'll be some reluctance for people. And by the way, I know for a fact that there are people waiting to hit a certain number, cut their losses, and revert to cash. There's a lot of people, myself included, that wish we were in cash position today. The only people I know, Juan, that are in a strong cash position are the people participating in the Peeptrade contest, because you have given them the cash. It may be play money, but it's real money. It's out there, and it shows me what my investment skills may be like. So I think, if ever there were a time, you and I have been down this road, okay? We have gone through investment challenges when the market was relatively stable, and you look for a home run here or there, okay? We've gone through investment challenges where the road was a little rocky. Take the fall of 19. We were up against the U.S. and China trade dispute. Would it be settled? How would it be settled? We go back to the election in 16, again, concerned. By the way, the teams that I oversaw in our investment challenge, we had it all figured out. Hillary Clinton is the next president of the United States, and under her leadership, here's what's going to happen. And that balloon got busted. And here we are in the most challenging investment contest climate ever in the history of the world. And some of you have started in the contest today. And I always tell my students the best day to start is one where the market is down, because hopefully it can only go up. You never want to enter the market. I remember one year that we had one of the universities was in first place. And we kept wondering, how were they in first place? They had made no investments at all. So at least for a week, the winner was cash only. But that's not what this contest is about. This contest is about taking responsible, rational risk. And again, some one of you out there is going to hit the home run. You're going to identify something in some sector that none of us have even thought about. And it may not be a very expensive position, but it may be one that had better growth over a shorter period of time. And obviously, any contest that over a short period of time present unique challenges of their own. So short-term contest, I'm not investing in something that looks good over the next 9 months, unless I think over the next month or so, there's a steady incline. If that's the case, then I wouldn't hesitate to invest in it. But if you believe the airlines are coming back in 21, I'm not sure to be investing in the airlines today, unless you know something the rest of us don't know.
There's a good one here from a guy that you might know. His name is Ali Bakir. He's asking unemployment. Please tell us how we should manage our 401k plans.
Well, my 401k has been changed. The name that they've changed it to a 101k. Okay. I think that, I come from the old school, which says sometimes it's best not to rock the boat. But I do think the one lesson out of this crisis is that once we get back to some normalcy, we need to take a look at our 401k investments annually. We need to consider changing our investment strategy annually. And I think many of us sign up for 401ks and we just kind of leave it there. We assume over the long run, it's going to do better rather than worse. I think now to hit the panic button and make significant changes, such as selling and going to cash, would come with some risk. So I would not necessarily be encouraging that. That being said, the United States has changed its tax laws to provide that you may invade your 401k without a penalty up to $100,000. So I can take $100,000 out of my 401k without paying any penalty. And I have 3 years to put that money back in. So what is that in essence? It's a loan to myself. If necessary, that might be a good strategy. The problem is, as you know, once that money is taken out of 401k, what are the odds of an individual being able to put that money back in? That's what would concern me. And again, I think the older we get, the more we should be looking at life cycle funds, funds that are more conservative. I'm looking at one that I have that was down 22% in the last quarter. Maybe shame on me for not looking at that 6 months ago, but I chose not to. And again, in your 401k, as balances go down, you're investing in, but you're investing in at that lower level. So there's growth potential there as well. So I would not hit the panic button. I think historically we've seen that when people do hit the panic button and make significant changes to a 401k during a time of crisis, they later say, you know what, I should have left it there. I probably would have done better than I had expected. Ali, can you tell, I wanted to ask Ali while he's here, can you give us an update? We hear some bad news coming out of Chicago. Can you tell us if those stories are accurate in terms of the cases being identified?
Ali, you are on mute now, so you can speak. Let me unmute you.
Ali, can you give us an update on Chicago, the environment?
Yes. Chicago is definitely, well, one, crime has picked up a bit this last weekend. More mass shootings because, people are just so scattered. And, also our police force has been hit hard by COVID. Many members have experienced, are experiencing the virus now. And that just, you don't want your police to be unarmed, undermanned. So that's gone up. As far as, yeah, you're right. Also, our highest reported cases was Saturday. So we obviously haven't reached the peak. So not near flatlining. And it's interesting that our governor, who's Pritzker, hasn't yet extended the stay at home. It's still set for April 30th. But I see that becoming May 15th very soon because, just, again, as aggravating it is and frustrating and stressful, but once you let people out again, it's just going to spread like a virus in every way. And they've already shut off all the public walkways. Like I remember, because Chicago is unlike Virginia and DC. We're still cold. It's like a roller coaster. One day we'll have 30 degrees, the next day we'll have like 60. So when it's 60 out, people are out and about and they're flooding the lake, flooding the river. So now cops are always monitoring that. They're not letting anyone walk anywhere near that because they notice that everyone, when you have that many people, it's just to be clustered. So we have to basically just walk the streets. And they're actually encouraging people to walk in the middle of streets, because they know the sidewalks are thin. So they want people to be, alert, but walk the streets because they want people dispersed. So,
have they maintained normal operating hours on the subway system?
It's decreased definitely, but it's so eerie when I see these trains go by. I mean, yeah. I don't see anyone in them at all. And even at first, when the first stay at home, there were people at the bus stops. No one's at the bus stops anymore. These buses are empty. These trains are empty. So it's just you wonder how long can this go on? Just because people might just say, survival of the fittest, because there's no money, no revenue coming in. These people, they'll be broke, and that's going to be a problem when you can't feed your family. You're just going to resort to whatever it takes.
Yeah. So Washington, D.C., the Metro has spread its hours of operation. It's actually reduced the hours of operation, but it has spread out the time between trains. That's made it more difficult. Then they've offered free bus service to anybody that wants it. But I watched the public bus pull up the other day and a big crowd get off of the bus. So they're being crowded onto the free buses.
Yeah,
That's
and
obviously not a solution.
it's funny how across this country it's so different. Like Jacksonville, Florida, they open up the beaches and people flood it immediately. It's like people don't realize until it hits home. That's the sad part. Until it hits home, until it hits you or your direct relative, then you're like, oh shoot, this is serious.
And I think increasingly everybody knows somebody. Everybody knows somebody.
Everyone knows,
somebody.
Yeah, I mean, exactly. At this point, everyone knows, but I know family members now. And that's the most scary thing to me is these third world countries. One, they don't have tenth of the testing supplies they need. And two, even if they did, they don't know how to manage it. Yeah. So, and those people are always going to be filtering in and out of their countries. So that's what scares me of it, keeping it alive for who knows how long.
Yeah, and I wonder how many of the international resorts are going to wind up folding or consolidating with the lack of traffic.
Oh yeah! Oh my God! And we're talking those mega
hand on how do you see the real estate? I know you.
Very good question.
Very closely. He runs
just got a hot report. Got a real estate report right off the mark this morning.
I tell you,
this report is suggesting that long-term investment in the apartment sector shows significant value. And they mentioned 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 different real estate ventures that we should be looking at. So I think apartment investments, long run, may be a solid mark. Now, that being said, we still have the issue with landlords needing to cut tenants some deals. And the best deal out there is a forbearance of this month's rent. Okay, that doesn't help my bottom line if I'm the owner, landlord. The next best deal is I negotiate an extension of your lease and I add those months now to the end of the lease. So let me give you a level of comfort. Don't pay me any rent for April, May, and June. The next 3 months, no rent, but your lease is now 3 months longer. Is that something we can agree to? And again, we might need to come back and add extra months to it. Having an empty apartment, having an empty retail store is not doing the landlord any good because there's nobody moving in. So I think that's an issue that the industry itself has to step up to the plate.
Yeah, sorry, another hat I wear. I'm a managing broker. So I've opened up my own real estate firm recently. And to be honest with you, I'm a little nervous because some people, they know this is opportunity. So aside from renting, I've been nonstop. I'm going all over the city. People know that now it's buyer's market to the T, but even sellers, because a lot of people have taken their properties off the market. So those who are confident enough and not really over worried about this COVID are just gung-hoing it. And I have some investors just buying left and right because they know that some people are timid in the other side saying, look, if I don't accept this offer, I may not get one for who knows how long this virus is going to last. So they're accepting offers that I would never even imagine before. So
how would you compare today's environment to 2007 and 8?
Oh my God, night and day. 2007 and 8, I'm talking nothing was selling. And even those investors who were hungry, banks weren't approving loans because the bubble burst. They were under a microscope, the banks. They couldn't really, they had to justify every loan they approved. So I remember they weren't giving, even if one of my, I had clients putting 30, 40% down, banks just nope, sorry, we can't fund that. We can't do that now. So those 2 years was just nothing. It was just it was compared to now, that's not the case. Mortgage rates are rock bottom low.
Yep.
There's so many more programs that people aren't focusing on because there's way more important things. But it's funny, it's kind of what led to that bubble in 2007 and 8, but it's a little different. But they have programs now. They have a lot of friends who are doctors. They 0% down. You put nothing down and they'll give you a 3.3% mortgage, which is unbelievable. My whole life, I never saw anything, lower than 4% for most of my life. So it just tells you the government's also trying to do this, keep people upbeat and tell them, look, the economy was chugging it before this. We want to make sure try to do everything we can to keep that happen, keep the economy America prospering. So yeah.
That's interesting to hear. And Ali, with all of the banks being focused on the federal money that's going out, they're still taking the time to approve mortgages.
Oh yeah, yeah. They are, because there's so many mortgage brokers out there, so that's their job. Mortgage brokers are definitely busy, in the sense that when these rock bottom rates happen, everyone wants to refinance, so that's been put on hold. A lot of my mortgage broker contacts say, you know what, that's gonna see in a few months. I have no time for it right now, because you're right, they have to work a little harder to get these banks to approve these mortgages. So what banks have done now, these mortgages, they've increased. You have to have a really superior credit rating now, more than before. If you have under 650, don't even waste your time. You're not going to get a mortgage. So that's interesting. That's the difference between now and what caused the bubble before. Before, if you had like any credit whatsoever, they'd give you a loan. So,
Ali, what about construction within Chicago? Is construction, does it appear to be still going on?
it's funny. Everyone says, that's an essential service. So they're still working. But I, just by looking every day and driving around the city, at first I'd see these construction workers like it was nothing, but now I don't see them. Don't see them working half as hard as they were before. I think their hours are reduced. There's less of them on board. They're not saying that. They're not broadcasting that, because there's so much money invested in these new buildings. It's a great point you brought up. Like, I think across this country, but this is happening because the economy was booming. This bull market. I mean, Chicago, every area we had, I'm talking at least 20 new buildings sprung up in the last 5 years, and they're in the middle of building them. So, but now I've just seen a major slowdown in the construction. So
I think that there's a couple of good questions, I would say. First of all, thanks so much for your.
The only thing I want to add, if I could, to Ollie's, a lot of these construction projects have incentives built into them. So there's kind of pressure to keep the construction going. Just keep that in mind. But go ahead, Juan.
No, I'm seeing a couple of questions that are quite interesting. The first one, I think they're very related. Do you think that how governments deal with the economic crisis fiscally and monetarily by buying financial assets and bailing out companies has been one of the main reasons that increase inequality, and how do you think policymakers should deal with? And the other one says, in your opinion, does the economic effects could be worse than 1930s?
Yeah, I thought that was a pretty heavy, I saw that one at the end, and I'm going to hope and pray that that's not the case. I don't see any evidence today that that would be the case. But I want to get back to the first part of your question. Let's frame it. Repeat it again. Frame it.
That, like governments.
Yeah, let's talk about that. So I think, first of all, at the end of the day, governments are going to do what they need to do, and people are going to be free to criticize tomorrow, the next day, as to what they did. What I would like is governments to focus on the here and the now, and not be throwing into the legislation miscellaneous items that have no relevance to our overcoming this crisis. America is a good example of this. We will pass the bill that is very constructive in its overall approach, but we'll tack onto it everything under the sun. And I think it's time for somebody to say, enough is enough. We need money to put people back to work. We need money to sustain businesses. We need commitments on the part of business to keep employees employed. But don't be, and I'll just use this as an example, don't be throwing in X amount of dollars for the Kennedy Center, Arts Center. If you want to deal with that, you deal with that separately. And by the way, no sooner did the Kennedy Center get support from Congress as they started laying some people off. So keep the legislation clean, on point. Don't throw we're going to need that money for other benefits. And by the way, did everybody today see news that Shake Shack, a fine restaurant chain, is returning to the United States government the money it was afforded? I think, Juan, if I'm correct, I think it was $10 million that Shake Shack had taken from America for its business operations. It's now giving it back, because there has been some criticism of some of the big players taking loan money that perhaps don't really need the loan money. And, we ran out of the loan money no sooner than when it was first provided. So there's one example of a company, I think, acting very responsibly, saying, you know, quite frankly, we don't, and here's what their answer was: we don't need your money, United States government. We can get money elsewhere. We can get money from investors. We don't need to be taking free loans from you. So I thought that was a step in the right direction. Others will follow.
I have a question. Do you think like investments in the private sector, like maybe private equity or venture capital will thrive?
You would think so, wouldn't you?
I think that only the big players and the winners will take money.
I think there clearly are businesses. Look, when anybody offers free loan money, you're going to grab it, even if you just kept it in reserve. I mean, again, what are the requirements for getting that loan? If it requires me to keep my employees online, then I want to do that. Do I want to do that? Again, that's a question each individual company or industry is going to have to decide. But I mean, I think as Ali has said, there definitely are people that are going to sit on the sidelines now looking for their next opportunity. And there are certainly players out there with cash looking to get the best possible deal they can get. Question we have here, Juan, was the government bailout, why was it not beneficial for small and mid-sized businesses? Well, I'll tell you why. The so-called mom and pop operations, they don't have financial advisors. They, in many cases, don't have a working relationship with the bank. And the problem is the ones that have that knowledge, the ones that have that access are the first ones to go in and grab the funds. And I think a lot of the smaller businesses had nobody to turn to for directions. Now, could they turn to the Small Business Administration website and navigate their way, work their way through it? Absolutely. You know, one advantage to being in an association of other restaurants, other small hotels, is that you kind of pool your knowledge and your resources. I think a lot of our smaller businesses got blindsided by this, and at the end of the day started waving a white flag. Now, I hope with the new round of funding that they're better prepared to get on board. But one lesson out of this crisis is you must have a working relationship with a bank. You must have a working relationship with the bank. You must have a working relationship with a financial planner. You may think everything is going rosy, but what if? What are your contingencies that are at play? And by the way, when businesses do get back to semi-normalcy, how many of your employees that you've let go without pay are going to be willing to come back? So hats off to the companies that are keeping people on the payroll. We realize that comes at a financial price. But again, there's something about loyalty that ought to mean a lot.
There's a good one out there.
I was talking to a colleague, and the colleague has a very nice lady that comes and cleans his house every 2 weeks. And she shows up 2 weeks ago and says, "Thank you so much at the front door. You're my only customer. Keep me employed. Everybody else has told me, do not come in my house." And he said to her, "Well, I invited you here today so I could tell you not to come in my house, but we're going to pay you your salary every 2 weeks indefinitely." And she was very pleased with that. So how many of us are in a position to keep somebody on board, to help somebody that otherwise has no source of funds? I think that's incredibly important. Even if you're not, your reward will be later in life. It may not be tomorrow or the next day. So let's, again, always be cognizant of what others are going through. And some people are just too proud, too ashamed to tell you the struggle they're going through. But you read enough about it, you see enough about it on the internet to know that it's very, very real. So when I see people demonstrating, put me back to work, I understand that frustration. But we need to sit back and consider what's good for the whole and not necessarily for me individually.
Do you see the last question?
Thoughts on energy?
No, that should government care more for saving lives or saving the economy?
Boy, is that not the big question? Is that not the big question? And we certainly have had political leaders in certain states suggest, let's just get on with it. If the elderly, if the people with medical issues fall by the wayside, let's get the economy back and running. That's pretty scary to hear that. So if we don't seek to protect everybody, I don't think at the end of the day we're really protecting enough of the population. So that is definitely the big question. What should our focus be? I'd like to think our focus can be on both. Our focus can be on saving lives and also bringing the economy back. But bring it back slowly, progressively, reasonably. Certain parts of the country in the US, certain parts of cities in your countries may be better prepared to get on board. There are certain industries that can operate mechanically with very few people in play. Why can't we bring those businesses back? But again, businesses will be slow to come back if they don't think the demand is there. I mean, Boeing can start manufacturing planes. That's not, it's very, very mechanical. It's labor intensive as well. But I think they can set things up, and they've announced they're ready to start at least one of their factories. So I think there are industries right now that we've not considered essential that we could probably add to the list of businesses that are quite capable of coming back. So I don't know why we can't do both. Safety first, health first, economy at the same time. I think it can be done.
Emerging markets, do you think there's a chance for reform?
Well, that's a very tough question. I mean, I don't know where we are in terms of, there's so much criticism now about in America, Buy American. I saw somebody the other day, I'm demanding, I love this one, I'm demanding Amazon put on its website where everything I buy comes from. I mean, give me a break. Give me a break. American consumers have historically benefited by materials being made in other countries. We cannot isolate ourselves. If that means providing business opportunities in India, in Vietnam, in South Africa, we have to consider it's a global crisis. And we can't be the ones that kind of isolate ourselves from the rest of the world. So again, I think we have to continue our regular, normal business practices. Certain industries will be under the gun to manufacture back home. But even in this time of crisis, look at how dependent we are on what's being manufactured in other countries. We're just not capable of doing it all ourselves. Let's recognize that. And by the way, I guess the conversation regarding the wall has kind of taken a back seat. So we're not talking about isolating ourselves from Mexico or Canada, because we recognize at the end of the day, we need help from Mexico. Mexico needs help from us. We need help from Canada. Canada needs help from us. So stop putting up these artificial barricades and recognize that there are global business issues at play.
I think, well, anything else? I know we talk about 1 hour. And
it's been a great conversation. I think the more we talk things through, the better we are as people and as persons. And I think the questions have been outstanding. It tells us we've had a very large audience today. I mean, hats off to you and Ali and Peeptrade for hosting this. I know that's not an easy endeavor. You're in Munich, Germany, and Ali's in Chicago, and I'm in Washington, D.C., and our audience is from all over the world.
Yeah, I think we have someone else from Georgetown. Is Jim Angel there?
I saw him sneaking into that room this morning. Jim is one of my colleagues. He's a distinguished finance professor at Georgetown University. I will tell you that while I was traveling to South Africa, there's Jim. Jim Angel was traveling to Namibia, working on projects in a city called Windhoek, as well as in Johannesburg. So there's no one that I know of that, by the way, the airlines have seriously lost revenue from Professor Angel. They are taking a big hit on his lack of traveling. One of Jim's goals in life is to visit every stock exchange ever created. How many are you up to now, Jim?
About 75.
Wow. And can you tell us where the last 5 were?
The last 5, there were 4 new challenger exchanges in South Africa, in Johannesburg, but I've also been to one in Rwanda, in Istanbul, as well as South Africa. So I've been to a bunch.
Are you in the stock exchange? This is
Say what?
the Mexican Stock Exchange. We're partnered with them.
La Bolsa Mexicana es la bolsa más linda en el mundo. The they have the most beautiful stock exchange building of them all. I mean, it's this sort of beautiful dome. I mean, really, yeah. I'm always looking for an excuse to go there.
You know, like that is a great advertising for them because we partnered with them for this. Sounded like a little bit artificial, but it was not. It was actual conversation, right?
Buenísimo.
That was unsolicited promotion.
Unsolicited promotion, yeah. Any comments on your side, Gene? What are your anything you would like to?
Oh, well, I just wanted to echo a lot of what Professor Cooke said. I think we're in the midst of a financial pandemic right now, and there's going to be a lot of contagion and a lot of downstream effects. That it remains to be seen how our leaders are going to deal with that. As investors, it provides a lot of risk, but also a lot of opportunities. And in particular, right now, my favorite as a retail investor are the busted preferreds, as I call them. If you have a cumulative preferred, that's one that has to continue to pay dividends. And if the company survives, then you expect the the preferred to go back to its par value and pay the old dividends. So you'll notice a lot of possible opportunities there in the area of commercial real estate and energy companies. Of course, that's also very high risk as well. So one has to do the analysis very carefully. But other than that, we've seen these kind of downturns before. So even though this particular pandemic may be unprecedented, we've seen market meltdowns before, and often the highest returns are right after the sharpest losses. And I wanted to echo what Professor Cooke said about 401k plans, that most retail investors are really bad about actually calling the turning points, and they usually basically buy way too late and sell way too early. And that's why market timing is a very dangerous thing. But I think looking at individual opportunities is an area where investors can actually find a lot of opportunities, because the people who are normally arbitraging markets are basically capital constrained right now. And that's why we're seeing a lot of opportunities for the people who are, do their homework very carefully.
Circle point and quick area for my company and into crowdfunding. Well, I think we need to take a little bit more crowdfunding stage or investments for startups.
Tim, can you see that question on FinTech?
Yes, I see the question on crowdfunding. I'm a big fan of crowdfunding, but a lot depends on the particular circumstances. So it's not a one-size-fits-all panacea. That now, there are different types of crowdfunding. There is pre-sales, like a Kickstarter. So if you have an idea that you just need some funding to get off the ground, and you can provide sort of advance, basically pre-sales, then crowdfunding could be a great way to both test the market to see if you really can sell the product, and a way to get the cash needed to get the product off the ground. If you're not, the kind of venture that really lends itself to a pre-sale, then it gets a little trickier, because the question is, what's in it for the crowdfunding people? Will they have an exit strategy? Will they have a secondary market for the shares? I know in the US, we put so many restrictions on crowdfunding for equity that not as many people are using it. Reg A+ seems to be a much better tool for raising money in that area. Now, as a fintech, a lot of people have gone to cryptos of various tokens as a way. I would say make sure you get really good legal advice before you attempt that, because a lot of people thought they were exempt from securities laws, and now they're learning a very expensive lesson that they're not.
What do you think about like there's a trend or like there's a lot of people talking about crypto, moving to crypto assets.
Well, I'm a big fan of crypto technology. I'm not so much a fan of most of the coins that are out there. So I basically would say that some of those coins that actually provide a useful service will survive, but if you can't think of any use for the coin other than speculation, it will probably eventually go to zero, even if it'll take a while. Now that being said, some people are really into the short-term speculation, in which case, if you can outguess the crowd better than I can, go for it. But as far as a long-term portion in a portfolio, I'm a fan of things that actually provide income, and that you can actually look at where the cash is being generated. That's a problem with most of the cryptos, in that it's hard for me to apply our valuation models to them because they don't generate any income.
There's nothing that backs up the crypto assets, I would say. Anything, Thomas?
The one I did confirm that Shake Shack is giving back $10 million. So they received a government loan. They're now saying we don't need it. We can find investors elsewhere, which is good news. Retail headline news: retailers begging for Treasury support. Treasury not listening. Richard Branson: I need money to keep Virgin Atlantic afloat. So a lot of people with their hands out. So I've forgotten, you recall the line, the sun will come out tomorrow. I'm hoping the sun will come out tomorrow for all of us as human beings, our families, as well as investors. So my ending message is stay safe, stay strong, do not engage in any reckless behavior, and we will come out of this over time. Safety first. Thank you, everybody.
Thomas, it's been a real pleasure to have you here. Jim as well. I know you're on the finalists for the last challenge. We're probably waiting for those news, right?
Good. Yep. Fingers are crossed.
At least you guys are always killing it on the. I think there's only one challenge that you haven't made it that well, but you're always top 3, I think, and it's a great program, the one that is out there, and it's great to have you here. We really, really appreciate your time and your wisdom, and we're very grateful.
No, I appreciate that. And by the way, we have this outstanding Master of Science in Finance program, and if anybody's interested in the program, they can contact me or Professor Angel, and we'll get information out to them.
Yeah, if you want, the next one, I'll send a link for the applications, if you can send it to me.
Good, appreciate it. All right, everybody, take care, be safe. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate your collaboration.
Very welcome.
See you soon.
Thank you.
Best of luck with the challenge. Thanks. By the way, thank you everyone for being here. The ones that participated in the challenge. It was a great attendee list, and thanks for your questions. Thanks for being active. Thanks for participating on the challenge. We're doing our best to get you there and to understand a little bit more what is this investment thing about, and we'll keep doing our best on these tough times. Okay. Thank you, guys. I'll say goodbye. Thank you, Jim.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.